What's going on, everybody? I'm gonna jam out for a little bit before we start. Hope y'all don't mind. So this guy right here, this guy named Owen Danoff. Watched him for a little bit. He's really, really good. I like him a lot. Whoop. These guys are pretty good. I love the kazoo. Hey, hey. There we go, Owen. Give this guy a look up, Owen Danoff.
That's where you are, I'm gonna say. That's cool, but if my friends ask where you are, I'm gonna say. She went down in an airplane, fried getting suntan.
Killing it. I love it.
Help me, I'm no good, goodbye. She met a shark on the water, fell and no one caught her. I returned everything I ever bought her. Help me, I'm all out of lies. And ways to say she was caught in a mudslide, eaten by a lion, got run over by a crappy purple Saigon. Help me, I'm no good, goodbye. She got lost in the desert, drowned in the hot tub, danced to death in an east side nightclub. Help me, I'm all out of lies and ways to say you died.
Man, killer. Again, look those guys up. Pretty cool. Let's rock on to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Very excited. Scranton Strangler here. Gonna throw out another football podcast talking about the 97 days until kickoff, which is going to be the Packers versus the Bears. Very excited about that. But until then, we'll have to make do with this podcast. So we'll go ahead and jump right into it. Now, speaking of this football season, this is going to be NFL's 100th year. So that's going to be exciting. I'm sure they're going to do some pretty cool stuff, and that's pretty much all they're advertising for. So now we're going to actually start off with my Scranton Stranglers rankings. These are... Excuse me. Woo! These are just leading up into the season. This is just my 1 through 32 in the NFL rankings. I know I did the college football 25. This is going to be my NFL. So that's the top 20, or I'm sorry, the low 20 through 32. I'm going to work my way down to the top. as Drake says, and then we're going to get into a little bit more things. But started out with Cincinnati and the Buccaneers. If you've watched any other streams, I know I've said that a couple other times. Those, in my opinion, are the two worst teams. It's a little tough to decide between the two, but I'm going to go with the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, also, we're going to move it on to the Redskins. Hopefully, Haskins will take charge pretty soon. And kind of move them up back. I mean, they actually exceeded my expectations last year because I didn't think they were going to do as good as they did. I think they went like 7-9. So that's a high point for them this year again. And then the Cardinals, so much question there. Is Cliff Kingsbury, his new system going to work? Is Kyler Murray going to work? So many questions there, so I'm putting them up there. Hopefully they'll jump up. Giants, Jets, we'll go with them there. Miami, Detroit, Titans, Jags, Bills. Really the NFC East. they're definitely going to be in the lower quadrant, and then you got the 49ers, and then the Broncos rounding out at 20. So move it on into the at least to the top 10. Pretty cool football field right there with the points. So then we got the Carolina Panthers, Texans, Raiders, Falcons. I think the Falcons can definitely be better than they are. They just they're so unlucky. They get hit with they get injuries. Pretty much half of their starters on the defensive side of the ball, and their running back got hurt last year. So I look to them to improve a lot just by staying healthy this year. And then the Oakland Raiders that have like 5 picks in the top 40 draft slots this year. So obviously they picked up some key guys. They got a number 1 wide receiver. They got their running back, and then a slate of guys on the defensive side of the ball. So looked for them. Obviously the Eagles, Baltimore Ravens, and then the Browns. Actually, guys, I did put the Browns ahead of the Ravens. Some of this obviously you're gonna be able to tell how I rank mine, because you've seen my brackets of how I think my projections of how this year is going to go. Some of these is going to project that, some of it's not. So this is just how I think that they were going to start at the year, post spring, preseason, if you will. So, and then we'll jump into the top 10 right there. Seahawks, Vikings, Cowboys, Steelers, Colts, Chargers, Patriots, Rams, Chiefs, and then the good old Saints at the top. I'm pretty in high regards for the Saints and the Chiefs. Those two, obviously, if you know, like I said, if you've done or looked at my podcast in the past, you know that I have them, my projections are them to go to the Super Bowl. And then, obviously, the last 2 Super Bowl teams were the Rams and the Patriots. So we'll definitely see how this year unfolds, but that's going to be my top 10. Now we're actually going to move on to my top 5 position groups. We're going to start it out on offense this week, and then my next podcast I'll make sure to include the defensive side of the ball for their position groups. Safeties, free safety, strong safety, cornerback, linebacker, defensive tackle, and defensive end, things like that. So we'll definitely get into that, but definitely going to throw out my top 5 quarterbacks. I'm going to start it out with the 5th, which is going to make it to 3-time Super Bowl contender, 2-time Super Bowl winning Ben Roethlisberger. Going to throw him out there. He's a solid guy. He always gets his numbers done. Now this is a big test for him this year. Is he going to put up the numbers without his top 2? Without AB and Le'Veon. Now Le'Veon, obviously, he didn't play with last year and threw for more yards than anybody, so I'm not expecting him to take a dip, especially with Juju Smith-Schuster coming up to take over the slack. Then you've got Tom Brady. Now I might get a little slack on, a little hate on this one, but I do have him in my top 4th. Now, these are all projections of going into this next season, how I think they're going to kind of come out. I think he might take a slight step back this year. And Tom's still, a terrific quarterback, still the best to ever play the game. But I just don't have him in my top 3 as far as quarterbacks statistically, things like that going into this next season. I do, however, have the Breeze Meister going in there. Outside of Tom Brady, he pretty much holds, he's got the passing record, touchdown, things like that. So I'm excited for Drew Brees. Hopefully he can get a win in this one and ride off into the sunset, but we'll see how that goes. But I do have him. He's another guy, kind of like Ben, that always gets his numbers, always throws for 4,000 yards pretty much, it seems like, every year. And he's doing it with a different cast now. He's usually pretty stacked, though, at wide receiver and running back, but outside of, against his age, he's doing it. So it's going to be nice to see him. Now, I do have the good old Aaron Rodgers taking it in. He's going to take 2 steps forward, if you will, in my opinion, this season, because he's taken one back previous to. Now, again, that's going to be subdued to injuries, things like that, but he's going to have Devontae Freeman coming back. He's got a big tight end coming in there, things like that. So it should be good to go. And then the good old Patrick Mahomes, I think he's going to take a step season for sure, a step forward, this season. This is his 3rd year in the NFL and only his 2nd year starting. And for what he did in his first year, I think pretty much blew everybody away. In just another year of practice, another year of reps. Unfortunately, he is probably I don't know how the Tyreek Hill, the Cheetah situation is going to work out with, legal situations. He might be suspended for the first couple games or so. But other than that, I don't expect him to, dive in performance because of that. So, my honorable mentions, I do want to throw out there my honorable mentions for my top 5. Outside of that is going to be Russell Wilson and then Andrew Luck. Russell Wilson's a guy, he puts his team on his shoulders. He's a guy that, he's probably one of the MVP for his team. He is the Seattle Seahawks. So without him, I think that they would be a very lost offense. So, and then Andrew Luck is getting better, getting back his groove. He seemed like he was getting hurt every year. He probably had 3 years where he was either hurt or about to get hurt. So Andrew Luck, he's going to take a step forward again this season, because he definitely took probably about 3 steps forward last season. So I look to him to be right out of my top 7 as far as quarterbacks go. Now I'm going to build us right now. I'm actually going to build the perfect quarterback. Who is out of everybody who is currently playing right now? Who is the perfect quarterback? If you wanted to put a certain attributes of each quarterback into one player, one perfect machine, if you will, who would it be? Well, I'm going to start out with the head. Who do I want? I want his head right. I want his vision, his focus, his things like that. Well, I'm going to put up obviously the GOAT, the greatest of all time. It was hard, obviously, something like Peyton Manning I would put in there, but, I'm doing it with players that are currently in the NFL. So Tom Brady is going to be my guy. I want looking around. I want in his mindset. So, and then I'm going to go to arm. Who has, a big arm, who can make all the throws no matter what? Well, that's going to be obviously Patrick Mahomes. I want him to that absolute cannon that he has from that baseball background. I want him to bring that into my perfect robot football, if you will. Next, I'm going to go into for heart. Who's a guy who's going to compete more than anybody, who just nonstop, never backs down, and that's going to be Cleveland Browns' Baker Mayfield. He's a guy. He's a hell of a competitor. He took the Browns from what they hadn't won a game in almost 3 seasons, and then they went what they did. They were one game away from a 500 season. So look to him to take another step forward with all the weapons, especially that he's got. But I have him, his competitiveness in my perfect wheelhouse. Then you're going to go, I'm going to actually put this one on to the body, and I'm going to go with Cam Newton. The guy is a monster when you look at him. He's 6'5", 200, depending on what year you got him, 260 pounds, 240, somewhere around that. He's kind of like Ben or so. So huge body. I would want his size. Make sure he can take hits. Make sure he can see over the line, things like that. And then you're going to go to the legs. Now I'm going to put a guy currently, now he hasn't taken a official NFL snap yet, but his wheels is probably one of the fastest that I've seen, since Michael Vick, and that's going to be Kyler Murray. If I want my perfect quarterback, I want him to run just like that kid, because if you watch him in college football, then you'd be absolutely amazed. So that's my perfect prototypical quarterback. If I could obviously scrap and build of what I've got of all of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL. So so that's the quarterback. Next, we're actually going to move on to the running back. Now, again, I want to reiterate that this is my thoughts, my rankings going into this season, who I think is going to be really succeeding. Number one, Todd Gurley. I think he's the best running back in the NFL. Not by a large margin. I think Ezekiel Elliott is right up there, right with him. The thing about the tip of the cap to Ezekiel Elliott is his health. If Todd Gurley can stay healthy, I know he's got some knee problems, things like that, then he's an absolute monster. So I do have him, Gurley, at 100% health. I would take him. But then, like I said, it's a small margin between him and Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott, his thing is he just never gets hurt. I love that guy, and he's running behind a team that relies heavily on him. So, Gurley, they have, it seems like 100 different weapons around the ball. They can. The Rams can kind of spread it out so they don't 100% rely on him. But Ezekiel Elliott, they pretty much do, at least until they got Cooper in there. So then I'm going to move on to Alvin Kamara. I think he's going to take a big step forward. I know I keep saying that. It sounds like a broken record, but Alvin Kamara, he's going to have a decent season. Last year he didn't have Ingram. And you could tell it affected him. He wasn't really happy when Ingram was moved and taken away. Excuse me. But hey, he's in a good place now. He's in a better place at least. And then that way that we can both see those premier running backs take a full load. That's what she said. Take off full carries and things like that from all the reps. So I'm gonna do Alvin Kamara. That guy's an absolute monster. He's a hell of a preparer. He gets himself ready, and I'm ready to see between running the ball and catching the ball. He's a great receiving back as well. What he's gonna do this season. Saquon Barkley. I almost put him higher. But Saquon is a guy, another guy that they are going to rely on him. The Giants, he was their best athlete last year, and then it was Odell Beckham. Now that they lost that guy, and they didn't really replace a guy that matches that level of talent. So, so Saquon's the guy again for the Giants, and he's going to have a pretty stellar year. He's an absolute incredible athlete, and so I have him rounding out my top 5 at number 4, and then ending the top 5 is going to be Christian McCaffrey. That guy, he's had a great offseason from what I've heard, and on a running team like they do, much like these other teams, I look to him to have a pretty solid year. Again, all of these guys are. The one thing that they have in common is that they're incredible catchers. you kind of have to be, be that multi-dimensional running back now in the NFL if you want to succeed, or it's running back by committee. So you're not going to get as many carries, obviously, as you want. So these guys are my top 5. Now my honorable mentions are going to be Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell is an absolute beast. Now he's coming off a year. He hadn't played in over a year, so he should be well rested. The thing why I don't have him higher is because I don't know how well he's going to fit with the Adam Gase offense, I guess. So I'm sure he'll get, he's got a young quarterback that's probably going to feed him. I just don't know if he's going to be as successful as he was in Pittsburgh. As that will he be in New York. And then Mark Ingram. So this guy's kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum. He's going into a new team, but I kind of fully expect him to up his game from what he has in the past. He's going into a good system. That the Ravens are a top rushing offense in the league outside of the Seahawks. So the Ravens are built for this, and he's a bruiser. They're built for that kind of running style. He's not too. They're not too much of a east and west rushing. They're just kind of pound it right at you. So he's gonna have a good year, and I'm actually excited for him. He's gonna definitely make a huge difference into that Baltimore Ravens, because the Baltimore Ravens really haven't had a premier running back like him in a few years, and they're still one of the top rushing offenses in the NFL. So Mark Ingram gonna take a huge step forward for them. I'm gonna switch it over to the wide receivers. Give the wide receivers some love. Now my top 5 are gonna be Julio Jones. Julio Jones is gonna get he's gonna get his catches, he's gonna get his yards, he's gonna get his touchdowns. He started off very slow last year. He went quite a few games without getting touchdowns. He got his yards and he got his catches like he always does, but he wasn't scoring. And then once he kind of got rolling, it was a trickle effect. So I think they're gonna try to establish him a little earlier in the season, try to get him going, so that they don't have that lack. Because if I looked up their production, he's probably in the 30s as far as their offensive production. Especially with their injuries, between other receivers and then the running backs that they use, Tevin Coleman, things like that. So outside of Julio, they've got so many weapons, but Julio's the man there. Then you're gonna move on to DeAndre Hopkins, which it was tough between these two guys. DeAndre probably has the better hands between the two, and they're both real big guys. Julio maybe a little. I'd have to look it up. He might be a little faster, but I put Julio. He's just been doing it more, and he does it more consistently. So DeAndre Hopkins finally has a quarterback, a consistent quarterback that can produce. So I'm excited for him. Third, I'm going to have Odell Beckham. Now, Odell Beckham's kind of disappointed us here in the last couple years. Well, that's because of Sheila Manning. So now you're gonna get him, stick him with a guy like Baker Mayfield, who's incredibly accurate. That's one of his greatest attributes, is he's very accurate for as small as he is. So, and then he's a number 1, and you get this is going to be the best number 2 that he's going to have on the other side of the field, and his best buddy, Jarvis Landry. So, and then you've got a huge tight end up the middle, and David Njoku. So these guys are set. And then Rashad Higgins. I'm very excited. A lot of people were worried that it's not going to work out, that there's going to be some, back and forth lash between the players. Maybe, I want the ball more. I think that these guys, they very well could. There's absolutely potential to. I just don't know if it's going to, because I feel like these guys are going to make it a point not to. They want to be that new team, that new dynasty. They've already said they want to be the new Patriots. Well, everybody on the nobody complains about getting the ball on the Patriots. Nobody complains like that in a Bill Belichick, team. So that's a point where you have to look at, Freddie Kitchens, and things like that, and the GM, blanking on his name right now, but you have to look at them, to produce that kind of trickle effect like Bill Belichick does. So then we're gonna move on to Juju Smith-Schuster, taking the rings. He was the number 2 wide receiver last year, technically, and he had more yards than the number 1, which is Antonio Brown. That's why he threw his little pity party, and won the MVP. His team voted him MVP over Antonio. So Juju stepping officially into that wide receiver 1 role. I looked for him to have a pretty solid year. Excuse me. Whew. As well as I do, for Ben Roethlisberger. And then I've got T.Y. Hilton up there. They've got a guy on the other side now that's going to, take the pressure off. T.Y. He's a smaller guy, but he's a very fast guy, and I look for him that deep end, that vertical speed. Him and Andrew Luck, that connection has been pretty solid now for about 5 years or so. So my honorable mentions on them are going to be Mike Evans. Now, Mike Evans is an absolute monster like those top guys. His issue is just his quarterback. Jameis Winston, I just can't trust him. You never know if he's even going to be healthy. He gets hurt every other year, and then you had Fitzpatrick, which is just a nightmare. So for me, this is Jameis's do or die year. So if he has a good year, then obviously Mike Evans will. We really just got to throw it up for the guy. He's that kind of guy. He's that jump ball, let me go up and get it. Sort of like a Dez Bryant, but I think he's better than Dez Bryant. So. Or was, and then I've got Antonio Brown. And Antonio Brown is one of he should be higher up on this list, but I don't know if I can trust his quarterback either. He's one of those guys. If he was on the Pittsburgh Steelers, he would be higher up on this list. But Antonio with Derek Carr, who knows how they're gonna mesh. There's too many question marks for me, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at, for me to put him up higher. So he's going to be my honorable mention. He's a guy that's used to, 100 plus catches a season. So as long as they can continue to feed him, and be productive, then he should have a decent year. So we'll see. Now we talked about our wide receivers, and now we're actually going to switch it over to the tight ends, because who can do anything but a tight end? Now, this is going to be a Gronkless list, I guess, for a first time in a while. But we're going to start it out with Travis Kelce. I like the guy. He can really do it all. He's a good blocker. He's a good pass blocker, run blocker. He can make the catches. He can make the special catches. As you can see right there, that clip that I got, that one-handed catch. He's the new top tight end in the NFL, so I'm excited for him. Number 2, Zach Ertz out of Philadelphia Eagles, Mr. Consistency. Just not a flashy player like Travis Kelce might be, but just a good, solid, kind of like a Witten almost, but a little bit younger, a little bit more. He's got a lot more movement than Witten. Witten's the guy that's just gonna hit the sticks and then stop and turn around. So. And then we're going to have Greg Kittle out of the 49ers. As long as his quarterback can stay healthy, he should have a pretty dominant year with Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, even Mullen, the backup, had a strong connection with him. And then you're going to move on to David Njoku, which with Baker Mayfield, hopefully they can develop a security system, security blanket type feel, because that's what since Baker Mayfield's that scrambling type, that he could really use that if they could have that solid connection while his playmakers, go out and do their thing. That's just going to be unstoppable. And then you have Hunter Henry in with the Chargers. Filling out at my top 5. He's going to have a pretty dominant year with the gunslinger over at in LA Chargers with Phillip Rivers. So now my honorable mentions are going to be Kyle Rudolph. I'm a big fan of Kyle Rudolph. I just don't. I didn't think he was going to be a Minnesota Viking still. So they've got Irv Smith Jr. Maybe they'll run a couple, double tight end sets, something like that. They just have actually quite a lot of playmakers on the field, at wide receiver. So I just don't know what they're going to do with two elite tight ends like that. So, and then my other honorable mention is going to be Greg Olsen with the Panthers. He's just a great athlete in itself. He's another guy that can. He's a great run blocker, great pass blocker. He's had some injuries as of late, and I think that's what's kind of kept him out. But 2 years ago he was a top 3 tight end. So we'll see. We'll see if he can kind of get it rolling again. So that was my position group top 5, if you will. Now there's a lot of things to be excited about football season. It's my favorite time of year. But here's a couple other things that to add on your list of excitement. Now it's not all about the NFL per se. Like I said, this isn't a show just NFL, but we're gonna move it on also to expand it on college football as well, stuff like that. So we're gonna go down that list. Excitement. Some of the most exciting things, 10 exciting things for the 2019 season to watch out for the Scranton Strangler. Patrick Mahomes. That's a guy I'm very excited for. Again, like I said earlier, this is his 3rd year in the NFL, but he had the luxury of sitting out his first year and kind of learning the system, things like that. So, behind Alex Smith that first year, and exploded onto the season. His second year really was his first year playing. So he made that great run last year. Was this close to going in, to the Super Bowl, but just lost just short against the Patriots. He's a gunslinger. He always does something, with the no look pass and the left-handed pass. He's a right-handed. He can just do so many things, and with that baseball background, each year I feel like he's a guy that's just going to get better and better. Very overlooked quarterback, coming out of the draft. I know he was Andy Reid's just got an eye for quarterback, because I'm curious if they didn't trade up and pick him, I wonder where he would have fallen. The Chiefs. So Andy, tip of the cap to Andy Reid for calling that one. So next are going to be the Cleveland Browns. When's the last time you heard somebody say they're excited to watch the Cleveland Browns this year, right? So they finally have their guy after the past 20 years, drafting quarterbacks left and right. They finally get their guy, Baker Mayfield. This is going to be his second year. Quarterbacks, people, some go through a sophomore slump, if you will, that people say. I don't think that's really going to happen with him, especially with all the weapons that they've added for him. At the running back status, they've got they've got Chubb, and then they also added that Kareem Hunt guy. Now he'll be suspended for the first few games. But once he gets going, man, he was a very big part of the Chiefs' offense last year. And when they lost him, you could definitely tell, although they had Damian Williams to kind of step in out of Oklahoma. So, Cleveland Browns, very excited to watch. The Pac-12 rising. Well, the Pac-12 have been out of the college football playoffs for a few years, and I think that this could be a year where they return if they have an undefeated team. I think Washington is a very big part of that. Washington is the team, probably the closest team that's the closest to get in. And then outside of that, obviously, Oregon, they've got that quarterback. So Washington's got a new quarterback coming in now that Browning's out. So Pac-12. Don't count them out this year. I know they haven't made a splash in the past couple of years, but hopefully they can get it going again. Another thing to look out, exciting things are going to be second-year coaches. Now, Dan Mullen, Scott Frost, Dan Mullen out of Florida did a great year last year. So I'm hoping, they can give the SEC a little bit more competition and run for their money. Then you've got Scott Frost, obviously from Nebraska. They started out horrendous last year, but then kind of kept it going. So hopefully they look to get everything started early, and now that they've had a full year and off season to prepare, hopefully they'll have a little bit start to their season like they did, unlike last year. Sorry. And then Chip Kelly, a highly thought guy. This is going to be his second year in UCLA. Didn't have the best first year, but again, it was his first year in a brand new system, coming into a whole new place, because he went from the NFL, obviously, and now he's back down to the NCAA. So hopefully he'll make a decent splash in the Pac-12. That's another team that they're not contenders really for the playoffs, but maybe they can here in a couple years or so. Jalen Hurts in a new system. Jalen Hurts is a guy. Obviously, if you know him, if you watch any football, he was the Alabama quarterback for a few years. Won a national championship even, and then last year benched. And then they actually 2 years ago in the national championship game, they actually benched him and put in Tua Tagovailoa, and then Tua obviously was the starter last year while Hurts backed him up. Now Hurts is going to go into the transfer portal and then come out on the other end in Norman, Oklahoma, and under Coach Lincoln Riley, he's going to turn into just a whole new system that he's used to in Alabama. So it's going to be interesting to see his transition and how he works. And is he gonna transfer into that system, or is Lincoln gonna kind of pull the reins back like he's used to from the past few seasons, and kind of cater to Hurts and what he's used to, because he's more of a big runner bruiser kind of guy. So it'll be interesting to see on that one. The next one is going to be NFL evolution of quarterback. Every year it seems like another quarterback comes down that's going to be smaller and smaller. They're not all going to be that prototypical quarterback of 6'5", 6'6", 240, 260 pounds, things like that. So quarterbacks are getting younger. We had last year where Baker Mayfield, speaking of, he was he was over 6 foot, which made the guys a little bit easier. He was just over 6 foot, and he had a lot of success. 27 touchdowns, set the record, things like that. So didn't even start the whole year. Now you have Kyler Murray coming in, and with his height, there's obviously still some question, but now another question adds, not just of his height, is can he get around that prototypical quarterback, and can he run around those quarterbacks and things like that, see over the line, answer those type of questions. So the NFL evolution of quarterback is changing, and that's what I'm excited to see, from this next year. So the next one is some old faces in new places. Well, we've got, what's another one? Mac Brown, old Texas coach. He's coming back and going into the SEC. And then we also have the Les Miles is probably the one I'm excited for the most. Les Miles is coming back, and then he was the coach for LSU back in 2007 era, and then he's coming out of retirement, if you will. And he wasn't really retired. He just really wasn't doing anything, just watching tape. And then he's going to be the head coach of Kansas University, KU Jayhawks. So that'll be excited to see how they, old faces, old drugs, new tricks, things like that, right? Next one, excited. I'm gonna see, next thing I'm excited to see. I'm sorry, guys, is going to be Alabama's response. Now, if you watched the national championship last year, you saw that Clemson took Alabama, bent them over a barrel, and showed them all 50 states. And so it's going to be interesting to see how Nick Saban, how they've obviously lost a bunch of, they seem to lose coaches every year. So, but Nick Saban, he's going to be there. They still got their Tua. They've got their Judy, obviously their star wide receiver. And I think they're going to be fine. With their schedule being so easy, they're obviously not going to stumble too hard. But they do have some tests. Whenever they go and they see Clemson next year in the playoffs, which I'm sure that they will. Clemson's turning that tide. They're riding that wave, and they've been doing it very well. So it's interesting. I'm interested to see how Alabama responds. And then the last I am actually excited to see is going to be a Gronkless world. I'm not too much of a Rob Gronkowski fan. Guy just kind of drove me nuts. So it's going to be interesting to see, from his perspective, how tight ends kind of evolve and who's going to claim that rightful take as that lead dog in the tight end race this year. So we've got a lot of new tight ends here in the last 2 years that have really exploded and done well. So with the Hunter Henry, the Kittles, the Mark Andrews, things like that, and there are more. But so in a Gronkless world, we shall move forward. So that's going to be my excitement for the 2019 season. Now we're actually going to move on to a fun little thing. It's going to be the Stranglers Quippets. So this is going to be something that we're going to add here and there. There's a little diagram of the divisions. But we're going to move on. This is going to be a few, a phrase or so that I can come up with that's really going to describe, and we're going to do divisions on this one. Now we can shake it up going forward, but on this one we're going to do we're going to describe each division in a short phrase, if you will. So I'm going to start out with the NFC East, and that's going to be Run Wild. Now this division is going to be a run-heavy division. They've got some of the best running backs as a whole. They probably have the best running back division right here. You've got Ezekiel Elliott, one of the best in the biz out of Dallas, as well as Saquon Barkley out of the Giants. Those two are studs. You've got in Washington, they kind of do a running back by committee with Adrian Peterson, obviously a legend. And then you have the young guy, Darius Geis, who I'm excited to see. I think he got hurt last year. He got drafted last year, but he got hurt in preseason and missed the whole season, so he didn't really get to do anything. So I'm excited for him to come back. He's an energy bunny. He's the guy, that third down, obviously you don't have to use him only in third down, but that they say he's that third down back kind of guy who's going to catch the ball and he's going to run it, the screen kind of guy. So out of LSU, he's a very, very fast guy, so I'm excited to see him. And then you have Jordan Howard. I know he's in a Bears uniform right there. I couldn't find a good one in an Eagles outfit, but he is now with Philadelphia. So Jordan Howard moving over. Which is a good solid runner for them for the past 3 seasons or so. So running wild, and then another thing that's gonna kind of round it up for them is every one of those offensive coordinators for those teams are young. They're in their if they're not starting their first season with their team right now as that with that position, then it's their second year. So. Obviously look on them to look to establish a running game, because if you can establish a running game, then that opens up so much in the play action and the pass, things like that, kind of spread them out. So look for the NFC East to run wild this year. I'm going to move on to the NFC South, and that's naturally unlucky, if I could describe them in a phrase. Now, you have the Saints, which are the obvious heartbreaker. Just the past few seasons have just ended in just shock and just unluck, unluckiness. And then you move on to the Atlanta Falcons, who have been injury plagued for the past, especially this last season. So they've got some guys back. Hopefully they can stay healthy. They've got their running back Devontae Freeman back out of injury. And then you go to the Buccaneers and the Panthers. Now they're similar but not, and why they're unlucky. Now they both have their guy. They have their starting quarterback in Jameis Winston and Cam Newton. Now why they're lucky is two different things. Jameis Winston, they just got unlucky just because he just hasn't produced. He hasn't been that Heisman winning, that national championship quarterback like he was. And then you look at Cam Newton, and he has been, but he just hasn't been lately. He hasn't had a good run. He got injured, obviously, last year. He's had the surgery. So look for the NFC South to bounce back. But if I could just describe him here lately, it's naturally unlucky. Now we're going to move on to the NFC West. The Fountain of Youth. I swear this division has jumped into the Fountain of Youth, because you look at the three guys on the left. You got the brand new young, the sleek coach Cliff Kingsbury coming out of Texas Tech, and then you have Sean McVay, which is the young genius mastermind who took the throne over from the guy to the right of him, Shanahan, which was the young guy, the offensive genius guy until Sean McVay showed up. And then you have Pete Carroll, which is the oldest quarterback in the NFL at 67, but he seems like one of the youngest guys out there. It's like when they drafted DK Metcalf and they brought him in, guy takes off his shirt. He's just full of energy as as an older coach, and I love it. So this NFC West, they're straight from the Fountain of Youth. All right, so then we're gonna round out the NFC with the King has returned. Now, the NFC North, I'm calling it this year. Aaron Rodgers has been really just battling injury, his coach, all sorts of stuff. Not a non-running game. He's just been battling a lot of stuff. So I look for him to take a step forward this year and reclaim that throne of the North, if you will. It's going to be tough. I'm not saying it's not going to be tough, especially with the Bears defense and the Vikings stacked offense and that wide receiving core. The Detroit, I could see Detroit's just kind of a mess. Hopefully, we'll see about them. But, I don't think the Detroit Lions are anywhere close to winning that division. So I look for the King to take that throne back. They're restocked, they're healthy now, and the King will return this year. We're gonna break it off into the AFC South with feeling lucky. We've got Andrew Luck. That's what I'm calling on this AFC South. I am feeling lucky. I'm feeling lucky with Andrew Luck. I feel like Andrew Luck's gonna have a good season. He's gonna claim actually the South. From the Houston Texans. So it's going to be an interesting fight between those two. I don't think that the Tennessee Titans, they just the Colts just have their number. So it's just a matter of Luck versus Watson, and I think that Luck's going to take it this year. So I am feeling lucky, if you will. Then we're going to move on to the AFC North with who knows, because I don't. I have no idea. Don't know between the explosive, exploding Odell Beckham and the Baker Mayfield and the Browns, or then you have the solid defensive running game in the Baltimore Ravens, and then you have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who usually have been the most dramatic team, but seem to usually get themselves together, but they couldn't last year. So the Bengals, they're a mess. I don't look for them to do anything, but AFC North is truly a chaotic, big riddle to me. So I went with who knows. Now we're also going to move on to the AFC East, which is too easy. It's too easy for that guy. I don't think anybody's going to stop them. In the 19 seasons that he's been there, he's truly only lost it that the full season he's played once. The other two, were from injury. And if you look at the other teams, their offensive total offense last year for those other teams were ranked 29th, 30th, and 31st in the NFL out of 32 teams. So it's just going to be too easy. Again, obviously they're going to go to the playoffs. They're going to win their division. We'll just hopefully they get caught, sleeping. I think that's what's going to happen. They're going to get caught sleeping unprepared because they haven't really just had any challenge. So too easy, and that's what I'm going with on the AFC East. Now we're going to go to the AFC West, finish it out. And that's going to be gunslingers, because that's what this division is full of. Gunslingers, from Patrick Mahomes to Phillip Rivers, and that now you add the other two. Joe Flacco, which is he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He's a gunslinger, but then you've got Drew Lock that's just waiting to take the reins behind him. I hear he's with the third string offense right now in OTAs. Which is a little surprising, but hey, they're going to take him on slow. Just slowly progress him through the third string to second, and then who knows whenever he'll take the reins off, if maybe it'll be next year, or God forbid, I'll knock on wood right there for Joe Flacco, if he were to just be thrown in there due to injury to Flacco. So, and then you move down to the gunslingers over now in Arizona Cardinals, with Cliff Kingsbury bringing that type of offense to the NFL and to Arizona. And then you have a guy in Kyler Murray who's absolutely used to throwing the ball, with baseball and with his the type of offense that Lincoln Riley runs at Oklahoma. He's a Heisman winning quarterback, so he can absolutely sling it around there. So AFC West are just absolutely full of gunslingers, and that's where we're gonna leave it off today. Now, guys, I really appreciate you watching. Don't forget to follow and subscribe at the top. If it's your first time viewing, greatly appreciate you guys stepping in, and don't forget to watch the other videos so you've been caught up and know exactly what I'm talking about. And don't forget to follow the Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Now, next week, I know I try to put one out every week, but my fantastic and beautiful wife will be having a baby this weekend, so I'm going to be there, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to make my next video. I absolutely will as soon as I can, but I just wanted to let you guys know, let you guys be aware of that. So wish us luck. I appreciate you guys watching again, and I hope you guys have a good night. So.